19 Democrat state attorneys came out and sued Trump and Trump's Treasury Secretary. Because of this ban, DOGE still doesn't have full access to the Treasury, and they're still kind of fighting over that. I'm hoping that this opens up a larger conversation for us about unelected officials. That's kind of the buzzword right now being thrown around, because there's a fight right now over what is considered to be the true government official, or this is somebody that's rogue, which is what they're calling Elon Musk.
So I started a conversation with my wife the other day about Elon Musk's DOGE and the current fight against political corruption and the national debt. And what she had to say, I honestly did not see coming.
So my question to you guys is DOGE a legitimate arm of the executive branch? Should it be allowed to have access to all these agencies and the information all these agencies, and then also have some power over, firing, hiring, and trying to cut out inefficiencies or waste? Should they have access to citizens' personal information, and why or why not?
When somebody says legitimate, what do we mean by legitimate? Does it mean that they're a legitimate branch if they were unelected officials who were appointed by elected officials? Like, is that legitimate, first of all? And then second of all, to answer the question directly, in my opinion, regardless of whatever the definition of legitimate is I would say that they're just as legitimate as any other unelected branch, because that's how it all works.
So let's name some unelected officials. We have the EPA, we have the IRS, we have IRS auditors, CDC scientists, FBI agents, SEC, Security Exchange Commission, FDA, U.S. ambassadors, military leaders. We have police force leaders. We have city managers. So are all of these
Bill Gates? You put Bill Gates on that list,
right? Right. Are all of these illegitimate? Well, I would say some of them are. Yeah. So, but the point is that now they want to use this buzzword, unelected officials. But to answer your question, absolutely, they should be able to access these things and be able to provide this feedback. I don't know that they need to have the power to do the things with it. The actual agencies, the actual people in leadership are the ones that need to pull the strings and make things happen as far as letting people go, removing people, that sort of thing.
I'm going to break in for a second and say, if you're enjoying this episode, stick around. And at the end, I'm going to show you how you can get access to exclusive content that's only found on locals.com. To Ryan's point, you mentioned the FBI and that long list of unelected officials. Mm-hmm. The FBI was created out of a necessity between 1908 and 1923. And so what happened was, after the Industrial Revolution, you had the rapid growth of large cities that we didn't have before. In 1908, we had over 100 cities at 50,000 people or more. And with that came organized crime. Obviously, think about early 1900s, 1920s, Al Capone, gang. You think about the gangster films, the gangster stories, these are based on real things that were happening. And there was a sudden growing necessity for a federal bureau of investigation. There was pushback against the FBI. It did start small and grow into something different. Mm-hmm. But, when I think about something like DOGE, I'm like, well, the question is, if it's legitimate or not has everything to do with, is it necessary, is based on where we are as a society. And society has changed the same way that it changed in the early 1900s. And now we're in 2025, and it's changed again because of the internet, because of social media, because of, foreign affairs, decisions that have been made. You couldn't imagine a world where the FBI didn't exist. Why? Because we need an FBI. Whether they're doing their job right or not, maybe we wouldn't need DOGE if the FBI was actually doing their job right, and everything. But that's beside the point. We need a federal bureau of investigation, and I wish they would do their job better. But that's the question. Do we need DOGE or not? Mm-hmm. And FBI was created to investigate mainly, at the time, different forms of fraud, different forms of organized crime. What we're seeing DOGE uncover right now, I would consider as insane amounts of fraud, but also organized crime to the max. Yeah. It's today's version of organized crime that's happening right under our noses here in the United States. So is it necessary? Well, look at what's happening. You look at what they're uncovering, and then I believe that's why the public is quickly seeing that it is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, is necessary versus legitimate. Necessary makes it legitimate. And also, to your point, IRS was supposed to be doing the same sorts of things to make sure that all the taxes were being handled properly. And so you've got these two major branches that just aren't doing their jobs. So
Right.
I guess we need another one. But then, that goes into the conversation of like, well, hopefully this one also continues to do the right thing. And so far we're off to a good start, but my hesitation is always the expansion of more government. So I'm glad to see that what the DOGE is doing is cutting a lot, so that even though we've added something, we're taking away a lot too.
Right. And, the government is meant to be run by checks and balances. So either people aren't doing their job and they're not checking, it's like if someone's supposed to come check up on me at my workstation, at my cubicle, and they're not checking up on me, chances are eventually I'm just going to get lazy and be like, well, nobody ever checks on me. So I'll just do whatever I want to do.
I just stare at my desk, but it looks like I'm working.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the checks and balances are there for a reason. And if they're not happening, then we need to adjust, then it's time to make a change.
Obviously, we would like the Treasury to be doing things perfectly and auditing themselves in a fair and balanced way. But it's like, if we have judges coming in and saying, no, the president's appointed auditing board isn't allowed to come in and audit the Treasury. It's like, well, then who is allowed to come in and audit the Treasury? Right. There's reasons why they want to cut out DOGE as much as possible. But to say that the president can't appoint somebody that they want to go and audit the Treasury, it's sort of like no, just don't touch our golden goose. Just don't think of the children. No auditing, please, no auditing. Think of the children. That's kind of the scenario that's happening.
Well, that raises an interesting question too, because it's like people would point to, well, it shouldn't be Elon Musk. That's one of the things, like how much power do you give to an individual? Here's the crazy thing. I mean, I read this article by Time Magazine this week about Elon's DOGE, and they literally say in the article, Elon Musk is not technically part of the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah,
he's technically not even a part of it.
Yeah, these are just spin jobs. Like, that's all it is. And like what I would say, you have the checks and balances piece of this, which, we shouldn't have fraud. We should, all those kinds of things. But then you have the other side of this, which is this improvement thing. So I've worked for 20 years in supply chain manufacturing in corporate America, big companies, hundreds of companies. And it is the dream of every company that I've ever worked with to have a department dedicated to eliminating waste and finding inefficiencies and improving things. Like, that was my job. Like, I would be hired to come in and help a company do this because they wanted to do better. Like, so for anybody to be against this is just insanity. Like, you see people like leaders like Pete Hegseth that said, yes, come in, we're ready. Let's have a look at this and let's dive in and change what we need to change. It's the people who don't want you to look under the hood and find out what they've been doing or get rid of their money-making scheme. Like, that's who doesn't want this to happen.
So as my wife and I jumped into this conversation about Elon Musk and DOGE, some strong feelings began to surface on both sides. I was looking at it generally from the bird's eye view, the long-term effects, and she was thinking more about specific people that may be negatively affected along the way. One question I had to answer for myself is this a topic worth arguing about? And as she expressed her feelings and some of the research that she had done, my perspective didn't completely change, but it did begin to grow. Well, I'm going to push back a little bit, Ryan, because I understand your point when it comes to officials, right, that don't want this, people in power already. But when it comes to the public, one of the things I've been talking with my wife this week, and one of the issues that she raised was, what is DOGE's view of waste? Somebody like Elon Musk, I remember I watched a video of him when he bought his dream car back in the early 90s. And there's a video of him coming out of his office, going to the street. He bought the most expensive car at the time that he could buy. And he looks over the car. He's like, wow, this is beautiful. I love it. They drive it out of the back of a truck. And he's like, I love it. And there's some people like asking him, like, what are you going to do next? He's like,
I'd say the real payoff is the sense of satisfaction in having created the company that I sold.
He didn't even drive the car. He sucked all the beauty out of the moment. It was all about the achievement and I bought this thing. And then I'm going to go back to work, but it was like, where's the beauty in that moment of like, I'm going to drive too fast down the road in my new car, and that's the thing. And one of the things my wife asked about was like, okay, what about like the cuts when it comes to the parks and recreation, and like things like that, is that going to affect us as a nation, not just when it comes to efficiency, but our way of life? And next time I go to a state park or a federal park, is it going to be a little more trashy, because they didn't have as many people to clean it up or whatever? Or is it going to be a little less manicured? And those are the questions that I believe the public is asking, not just the officials. And the public is not always completely informed, obviously, and it takes diving into the information. But that's one thing I would throw at y'all is, what do y'all think about that side of things? Is who gets to decide what's waste and what's not, and how do we protect the beauty in our nation? You know, the land of the free, home of the brave. Like, but you see, like the blue bonnets. You know, like blue bonnets are not technically needed, but we're all glad they're there.
Yeah, I do think there's a difference between like Trump, when he was talking to the press about this, he said, you know, you would think you'd be looking at 100 things and maybe find one thing that was illegitimate. And he said, we're looking at 100 things and trying to find one thing that's legitimate. And so I think like taking care of a park is not something that's even on the table. Like that's, and having the right amount of personnel. We're talking about things like supporting transgender surgeries in Tanzania and educating people about those kinds of things. And like this is just insanity, the kind of things that we're spending money on, and the kind of research and the kind of just wasteful things. And like you said, it's 100 to 1 versus 1 to 100. It's almost like if we get rid of this waste, we can have more beautiful parks. But I think it's also important to know that like the DOGE is not, they're not actually the ones that are going to remove funding. They're not the ones that are actually going to do it. They're providing, as I understand it, recommendations. They're exposing these things. And then it's on us to make sure our elected officials who have the purse strings to be putting the heat and putting the things on where these things have been exposed. And so they need to be taking action on what's been exposed. And if they don't, then we hold them accountable by removing them and having somebody that's actually going to do the actions to give the budget that's needed, actually do the cuts. So that, I mean, that's where Trump is different. He's actually making the cuts that make sense. He's already reversed a couple of things where it was like, oh, okay, well, this was too much or this wasn't right or whatever. It's like doing the right thing, you know.
To go off of what you were saying, Troy, and hopefully maybe to leave anybody that has a little bit of that hand wringing, I would say 2 points. One is I think a lot of people don't quite understand the severity of what our government and us as a society, because of our national debt and the kind of like crime ring that's going on currently, keeping our deficit high and our debt high. But it's like just this, like you follow the money trail and it's like, from this politician to USAID, and then it goes to this NGO, and then it goes to this person, and the whole thing comes back around to a small handful of people getting the money back into their pockets, having conferences and paying really high speaker fees for all their friends, and none of the money is actually helping anyone abroad. And now they're saying, oh, because Trump's cutting this, now people are going to die overseas, they're not going to get medicine and stuff. And it's like only a small percentage of USAID's stuff was actually helping anyone. Most of it is literally just a big old laundering scheme or a regime change scheme for the CIA. So we're looking at something that's like, if this is not gutted and corrected, our nation is going to steer off the road and hit a tree. Like we're looking at the barrel of a gun. If at any point, if it costs us more money to borrow money, if our interest payments go up, like the percentage of how much it costs us to borrow money, if that rate gets raised, it's like we're done for as a nation. Like we literally will not be able to afford it. And all the fallout that's going to come from that. So there's that piece that I think some people don't fully understand, like why the extreme cuts are needed. But I do understand the hand wringing, because on the other side, and I think this is a point for people on the right, we need to understand that now that the right has some form of power, we do need to take steps to like actually start making beautiful changes. We need to be cutting, but then like, as Ryan said, this needs to lay the groundwork for us to build something, and we need to build a better future, or else the cutting wouldn't have been, worthwhile essentially.
And I think most people love this country, and the people that don't, you're wrong. If you don't love the land and steward the land that you've been given and want the best for it, right? But the thing is, the balance comes where beauty is extremely important, but facts are also important. And that's what I would say to those that are worried about it is do a little bit more digging, do a little bit more diving. One of the things I did this week when I started to think about, well, okay, are they cutting the parks? Are they cutting the recreation? What is going to happen here? As I went, I watched a video by Ryan Zinke, who was a Republican congressman in Montana, and he was interviewed by News Nation, and he actually was the first Secretary of the Department of the Interior in the first Trump administration, which that department is over a lot of the public parks. That department is over conservation efforts, a lot of those things. Yeah, exactly. And so he gave his opinion on it. He said, yes, they are making cuts, but he said, He said, I'm all for it. And I believe they're actually making the right decisions right now. And he said the main concern for him was during the fire season, it will be a little more difficult for them to contain the fires. And he said, but they have made room for rehires to happen if needed during those seasons. But he said the main thing that's needed right now is not more workers. He said it's reorganization, because he said they're hiring way too many scientists to go run studies on why the fires are happening. And they're not hiring enough people to go fight the fires. They're not hiring enough people to just go out there and do the thing. And he said it's the organization that matters, and that's what's not happening. And he brought it all back to, and this is what I would love to paint this picture of. What is DOGE doing in all the different departments of the United States government based on what are they doing in this department, right? This was his point. He said, what is the mission behind public lands? What's the mission? And he said, if we can bring it back to the mission, then we can organize and restructure it in a way that we're actually fighting to complete the mission instead of just throwing money at things. And this is what he said. He said it's permitting, conservation, and then recreation. And so he said, we need to ask, are these things actually happening? And he believes that the answer is yes. Like if they reorganize for success, he said they can get a lot more done with fewer individuals and not waste as much money, as much of the taxpayers' money, and actually do a better job completing the mission and conserving these lands and creating a beautiful place for the American public to go and enjoy nature, and a beautiful place for the native animals of America to live and the raw, beautiful landscape to survive, to the next generation and for it not to go away. The whole point is to fight waste, to fight fraud, and to fight abuse. I think we've all said it pretty clearly is like, if that's happening, which Reese said it, it's like it runs so deep right now that we have to cut back. We have to cut spending. We have to cut the fraudulent money laundering, all these things, or else we are headed for a downward spiral. And it's so extreme right now. It's like, if we don't do this, we're headed for a bad place. And one of the things that me and my wife talked about that we both agreed on this week was there is going to be collateral damage. As soon as you start cutting the fraudulent spending and all this stuff, the collateral damage is already happening.
Yeah.
That's the point. The collateral damage is already happening. It's already there. That's the point of efficiency, is so that in the long run, less collateral damage happens. Sure. More people have good jobs. More of the land is conserved. More of America is running the way it's meant to run.
Beauty is all around us. And one of the most beautiful things in life are actually the relationships that we have with other individuals. Sometimes I find myself not giving the relationships I cherish the amount of care that they actually deserve. Especially when it comes to politics, it's very easy to just shut someone down or cut them off completely because they have a different opinion. I've had so many people over the years tell me that their marriage is struggling or their friendships are struggling because of political differences. And I get it. It's hard to reconcile complete opposites. But when it comes to the little things, I think compromise should not always be viewed as a curse word. We should absolutely stand by our convictions. But choosing to hear somebody out and listening to their perspective is not the same thing as compromising on conviction. I think we're all going to face this choice at some point. Is being right, in this case, more important to me than protecting this relationship? Maybe the question I'm trying to ask is this: are we spending as much effort fighting for people as we are fighting against them?
This week's exclusive episode is all about the US penny, and here is a sneak peek.
Trump has the power to stop the mint from creating new pennies, but he does not have the power through an executive order to eliminate the usage of the current pennies and to get rid of them completely. That would take an act of Congress.
Maybe they say, okay, we're not going to make these anymore because nobody's using them. But then all of a sudden now it's like, well, not enough are available. So now we have to go to a digital currency and that's where you kind of slide it in.
Inevitably, we're going into crypto in one form or another, like you said, whether or not it's centralized, decentralized. And that's a big argument in the crypto world too, is how are we going to do that? How are the feds going to use it and all that?
I do think that the penny should be eliminated, and I'm actually going to lean entirely on the logic of the half penny. The half penny was in circulation. It was minted for about 60 years. And the reason that they stopped minting the half penny was because during that time, inflation rose so much that they considered the half penny to have no buying power.
Getting rid of the pennies could make a small group of people incredibly rich. There's 3 major ways that a small group of people think that they're going to get rich off of the elimination of the penny.